I thought it would be helpful for us to look at some of the dimensions of the social sector, specifically here in the Bay Area, so you have a context for some of the clients that you're working with. You know, what's interesting is, and this comes actually out of the amazing data that Stanford and the Innovation Project created looking at the sector within the Bay Area. So we've got almost 10,000 public benefit organizations with annual revenues over $25,000. And the reason that figure is because that's the threshold number for those organizations that have to file 990s. You know, they're basically their tax information forms for the IRS. What's interesting is within the Bay Area, we constitute over 30% of the social sector within the state. You know, and so that's over 23,000 organizations. But what is fascinating also is that we have that more than half of public benefit and social sector organizations have budgets under $200,000. So what is interesting is that as you're participating in ACT projects, where your budget threshold is actually over $200,000 and where your median has been is about 1.4, so you're seeing a very, very particular window of nonprofit organizations, social sector organizations here in the Bay Area. And so that's something to remember as you're working with your clients. Another thing that I think is another dimension is the fact that more than half of the public benefit organizations here in the Bay Area are 10 years or younger. And so and because we know that where organizations are in their organizational life cycle has an impact on what issues are coming up for them. So it's not an accident that you have organizations that, well, we really have to think about our mission and vision and values, because if you're an organization that's only a couple of years old, you're grappling with that, much more so than if you're an organization who might be, 15, 20, 30 years. But even then, as you get older, you also have to redefine yourself again and again. This is also something that you'll find in the organizations that you're working with. And again, 80% of Bay Area public benefit organizations happen in 4 areas. No surprise: human services, education, arts and culture, and health. And if we look at the projects that are just up this, in this time, this reiteration, those are reflected. So, the California hosts almost 8% of the total social sector. So California is a pretty significant player in terms of the range of nonprofit organizations, social sector organizations that we have. This is also, I think, an interesting dimension. We're talking about that 2/3 of organizations only have, not even 2.5 FTEs. So when we're talking about full-time equivalents, full-time staff. So if we're thinking about that, we're doing consulting for organizations that very often have really small staff. And the comments in the panel really reflected that in terms of you can come up with an absolutely brilliant strategy around how to implement, either financial management or how to do market extensions. But the reality is that very often, the social sector is phenomenally under-resourced in terms of staffing.
I just want to point out that the Alumni Consulting team has 2.35.
Yes, exactly. So they're mirroring what's happening. Right. Yeah. Almost 3 out of 10 of
It's not up to 2.4 yet.
yeah, 3 out of 10. Almost 3 out of 10 social sector organizations in the Bay Area are franchises or affiliates or chapters of national organizations. So that actually also creates a sense of that these local organizations are part of a larger context. The fact that, whether it's Girls Club or, national, the YMCA, the YWCA. So that these are organizations that have a greater often have access to a greater infrastructure because they are one out of a larger group of people. No surprise, 85% utilize volunteers. They have a range from anywhere from 2 volunteers all the way to 2,000 a year. So that's also, a reflection of some of the resource constraints as also resource assets that not-for-profits are trying to mine. But much of the work that they do is through their volunteers. You know, this is really interesting. 76% have websites, which is 3 times the national average. Now, I wonder why that is. And this is actually something that I think that is important to remember as we're doing consulting, is that the orientation toward technology, will probably be higher here, just because of the level of resources and access that social service or social sector organizations have being here in the Bay Area. I'm sure that oftentimes that many of your projects might integrate use of technology in innovative ways. Almost half of them develop strategic and business plans. Well, you're here. But I think also what's fascinating is those who are receiving government and foundation funding, that is actually higher. 60% of those organizations, because they have funding, and I think it's because oftentimes the funders are driving them towards really looking at strategy and business development.